we need to talk about the fires in California, all right? It's a conspiracy. No, it's not. I'm going to break it down for you a little bit. I grew up in California. I've lived here my whole life for 30 years, and wildfires in California is something that I'm familiar with on a personal level. Besides that, I've also studied land management practices, and I've been looking into this for a long time. So whenever he starts to come out with all this crazy discourse about the wildfires in California, from conspiracies to just being plain wrong to being half right and saying that's the full story. So we have people on one end saying, it's all climate change, we have to look at climate change, we have to look at climate change. And they're right, but they're not fully right. So we're gonna break that down. And we have a lot of people saying that it's all these other reasons that it has nothing to do with. So we're gonna break that down as well, and how we could improve our land management practices. And then also, I'm going to give you some information from a direct scientific journal where they're looking at this stuff, okay? So I'm not just talking out of my kuho here. This is gonna be some real stuff, all right? I'm going to just read you some articles. I'm also going to put the link to the scientific journal that I'm reading from so that y'all can understand this is a multifaceted problem that has a lot more to do with things that have been happening for hundreds of years and not to do with things that we've done in the last few years, or like Gavin Newsom in particular, although he's a douche. All right, so anyway, let's break this down. So first of all, the reasons that these wildfires are happening, some of them are related to climate change. And let's break those down first, because we got to get those out of the way, because we have a bunch of climate change deniers. So climate change is not global warming. It's changing in different ways in different places, all right? So some of the ways that it's been changing in California is that the vegetation is actually changing. This happened a lot when the European settlers came in and they were running cattle and other things through these lands, and we got a lot of these annual grasses. Annual means that they live and die in the same year. That means they grow, they get really big when it's raining, and then as soon as it dries out, they die, and they're just like fuel for these hills to burn, all right? So that's one of the problems. And then also forest management stuff, but you know, I'm just talking, these invasive species have been coming here for hundreds of years and we haven't dealt with them. It's a huge issue. So let's read a little bit out of this. A key consequence of climate change-driven aridification is that vegetation throughout the state is becoming increasingly flammable, setting the stage for extreme burning conditions, given an ignition source and otherwise conducive weather conditions. All right? Climate change can thus be viewed as a wildfire threat multiplier, amplifying natural and human risk factors that are already prevalent throughout California. And this is not just natural California. This is how we've changed California with these plants, and how this continued aridification is causing more of these plants to proliferate, all right? We need to actually select for plants that are going to be more resilient, or the ones that are just feed for the fire are going to proliferate in these conditions. All right, now let's move on to some of the actual climate change stuff. So California has been getting hotter and drier measurably over the last 4 years, leading to twice the amount of days that you would consider an extreme fire hazard that there used to be. So we have 2 times the amount of days that we could be causing fires that would be terrible fire conditions, all right? So because it's getting hotter and drier, these conditions are getting worse. Climate change, 1 point right there, all right? But that's not the whole story, because like I said, the vegetation change is another part of the story. And we're gonna get into how we could stop 90% of fires in a second. So yes, as things have been getting hotter and drier, it's been leading to and windy, bad, high extreme weather fire conditions. There's more chances for extreme fires to happen. There's more fuel to burn these fires. So we're getting into land mismanagement, we're getting into climate change, but what's causing most of these fires, all right? So it still says right here, nearly 88% of fires and 92% of burned area from autumn wildfires in California are human caused. Did you hear me? 90% of the burns are human caused. So it's regardless of whether the climate is changing or not, regardless of what you think is causing all of this, it's us, we're causing it, all right? So I don't care if you get everything totally green and get everything electrified, it's not gonna stop us from starting fires. We have to handle this problem on a level that's climate change driven, but it also has to be a little bit further than that in doing direct things, because climate change is not going to have an impact on us right now. If we start improving our carbon emissions, etc., that's not going to impact us right now. There are things that we need to do right now, like changing the vegetation. like working with our communities, etc. And if you look at this whole article that I'm going to link at the bottom of this video in the description, then you can check it out and read more for yourself. I'm just reading you some of the highlights. So remember, we start these fires. So if anyone's telling you the fires are caused by this, no, fires are caused by us. And as there continues to be more people living in these areas and the fire conditions are simultaneously worsening, there are going to be more fires, period. So nobody come at me with any conspiracies because it's all here in the data. Obviously, there's going to be more fires. Now, one other thing to consider this year in particular, they're saying it's going to be a La Nina year. That means in certain places like Southern California, it's going to be hotter and drier than it has been. We were in El Nino years, getting more rain than usual, and it was wetter. So these hot, dry conditions are going to lead to more wildfire conditions for us here in California. So anybody saying that this is some crazy conspiracy, it's like, no. This is La Nina and climate change and our poor land management all stacking up to make this terrible chaos that it seems like all these fingers are to point, well, they sent $1 million here, they did that. We are way more than $1 million over our head right now. Okay, so there are things that we need to do. And I really, it frustrates me because when this stuff happens to other states, like a hurricane hits somewhere, everyone's like, pray for them. But when this stuff happens in California, a lot of the other states are like, California needs to get their crazy liberal politics handled and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, man, we really need to stop fighting about what's causing the fires because it's us 90% of the time. It's not climate change. It's not this, it's not that. We cause the fires. So we need to either stop causing the fires, which I doubt we could do, or we need to put things in place to make sure that we are preventative against these fires being devastating for us and our communities. They talk about different ways that we can do that in this article. I'm going to read you one more thing from that, and then I'm going to try to wrap this video up a little bit. All right. So in the long term, right, reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions is the most direct path to reducing this risk, though the near-term impacts of these reductions may be limited given the many sources of inertia in the climate system. They're saying that these changes that we make that are going to affect our climate world, they won't be an instant impact. There's things that we need to be doing right now. Fortunately, a broad portfolio of options already exists, including the use of prescribed burning to reduce fuel loads and improve ecosystem health, upgrades to emergency communications and response systems, community-level development of protective fire breaks and defensible space, and the adoption of new zoning rules and building codes to promote fire-resilient construction. Assessment of those options will require integration of perspectives from multiple disciplines. All right, so this is a bigger problem. And I grew up in California. We didn't have snow days in Southern California. We had fire days where we got off school because the ash was too bad and they didn't want us on campus because we all needed to be sheltering in home. So if anyone's gonna say, this is a new thing, oh, this is not a new thing. It's particularly bad this year because of La Nina. It's particularly bad because of climate change. It's particularly bad because of ecosystem and habitat change through these annual grasses and invasive plant species and us mismanaging the forests and the mountainsides and all these places, okay? So these are all problems that we need to tackle. And what's not gonna help us solve this is pointing the finger or saying it's all the fossil fuel companies or saying it's all X or it's all Y. We need to actually start holding the responsible parties accountable for their actions, create more fire-safe infrastructure, and these fire breaks like they're discussing in this. And remember that climate change is only one piece of this, guys. So don't believe any of the BS conspiracy theories, but also don't get talked down from the ledge. Things need to change and stuff needs to happen so that we can improve the conditions so that we won't have a huge loss of both life, property, and people's livelihood, okay? People's lives are getting upturned in these fires. So we need to actually do something about it. So I'm just trying to put a little bit of discourse out there. This is what you should be looking at. Scientific published journals. Do not look at the crap information people are putting out. This is what's going on. I've lived here my whole life. It's not weird. This is just the way it's been going, and we do need to do something about it. So hopefully this educated you a little bit, or it reinforced your beliefs that you already had that were commonsensical and aware of the situation that's going on. Don't point the fingers at the firefighters. Don't point the fingers. We gotta look at what we're doing, and we have to make this better, okay, for everyone. And that's all. I'll stop here. All right, peace, love. Give your support to anyone in disasters anytime. None of these people set themselves up for this, okay? System is really messed up and a lot of people are hurting right now. So remember to have empathy and Yeah, take care, everybody. I hope that this stuff gets resolved soon, and we're praying for rain out here.